Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. I grew up in western Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has all sorts of wonderful qualities that I could go on about forever. Maybe I will, but not today. Today I'd actually like to mention a complaint I had against Pennsylvania when I was growing up there. When I was growing up in western Pennsylvania, there were two things that Pennsylvania was notoriously strict about. One was blue laws. Pennsylvania was probably the most aggressive state in the nation in terms of enforcing the closing down of businesses on the Lord's Day. That's not actually my complaint. I enjoyed that. I liked that. I think there's virtue in that, in those businesses closing. I'm not real fond of the government mandating it. So that's not my beef. My beef is the other thing Pennsylvania was fairly unusual about, was how draconian their laws were with respect to fireworks. Because every kid loves fireworks. Now, as I'm recording, I'm getting close to Memorial Day, and it won't be long till we're on the 4th of July, and I thought it would be appropriate to remember those few kinds of fireworks that we were actually allowed to have in Pennsylvania. And we will start with sparklers. Now, I admit that, once I turned 6, probably sparklers lost their appeal to me. They don't do much. They don't make a loud noise. They don't travel anywhere. They don't do any of that stuff. They just sit there. But that's the kind of stuff that you could still do in Pennsylvania when I was a kid. Not much, but you had those sparklers, and I guess it was better than nothing. At least you could hope for different colors and things like that. You could also get in Pennsylvania at that time, when I was a kid, two things that came out while I was a kid that weren't there at the beginning but were there by the end. One was these little snakes. It looked like a I don't know how to describe it, like a little slice of a half-inch long slice of a meat stick, Slim Jim kind of thing, and only it was black, and it was made out of charcoal. And the way this thing worked was you would light it on one side, put it on the ground, and you'd light it, and it would start expanding and sort of spewing out charcoal in a particular direction so that it started to look kind of like a snake. Yeah, that's it. That's all it did. That came out when I was a kid, at least to us in Pennsylvania. Also, we were allowed to use snap pops. Snap pops. That was a big deal for a while. You remember, this was like a little cardboard box, like the size of half a size of a pack of cigarettes, and there might be some sawdust in there to keep things from getting out of hand, and there would be little tiny globs of like tissue paper, almost shaped like a Hershey Kiss, only much, much smaller and thinner. And inside that, there was just a little bit of some sort of, gunpowder or something. And the way it worked was, if you threw it on a hard surface, it would go pop. It would sort of explode, so to speak. And it might have a little smoke come out, but nothing would actually get hurt in this. And you kind of startle your friends with these things. Wasn't much. Very, very, very slim joy in those particular things. But again, beggars can't be choosers. But the one thing we could have, we weren't allowed to have, not only M80s, we weren't allowed to have regular firecrackers. We weren't allowed to have bottle rockets. Now, when I say we weren't allowed to have, it doesn't mean it never happened. But I got to tell you, the kids who had those other things, those contraband things, they were the one. I mean, they were the kids who just were like scary to me. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I remember being afraid that, the police were going to come and arrest us because we were setting off bottle rockets that some guy's dad brought home from a business trip or some such. So we didn't have bottle rockets. We didn't have firecrackers. In fact, when I did have firecrackers, I would buy them sometimes from these kids. And I remember paying like 10 cents for a firecracker because it was just so rare. And you'd take it outside and you'd find a crab apple and you'd put it in the crab apple and you'd light it and throw it and hope that it would blow up and be really glorious. But it never was. The closest thing to being a lot of fun was the smoke bomb. This thing looked like like a cartoon bomb, although it had different colors. And you could buy these in the store, and it had a little fuse, a little round ball, maybe 3/4 the size of a golf ball with a little fuse coming out, and you would light it, and eventually it would just start spewing smoke out. That's it. That's all it did. But I loved it because, again, it looked like a bomb, and that smoke came out, and it was a lot of smoke and a lot of fun. As I said, beggars can't be choosers. I should mention one other thing, the closest thing we came to homemade fireworks. Because we were so impoverished from fireworks in Pennsylvania when I was growing up, sometimes we would do this. We would take boxes of caps for cap guns. And if you were really, really cheap and hungry for even the smallest thrill, you would pop it with your fingernail, your thumbnail, and then you get burned underneath there. But if you were feeling living large, you would take a whole roll and you'd smash it under a hammer, and it would go boom and go loud. Well, that's my impoverished fireworks upbringing. I hope yours was had more bang for your buck. It is a sure sign of the fall that we so egregiously miss what we lost in the fall. Jesus calls us to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness precisely because our priorities are all out of line. Even that for which we long, that we've got to get back to the garden we long for in the wrong way. Eden, to be sure, was Edenic. It was a garden paradise. There were no weeds crowding their way in there, no bugs buzzed in ears, nor stung arms and legs. Adam and Eve had no need to fear that prowling lions would consume humble lambs, nor that cyclones would tear up their garden by the roots. Eden was a place of joyful, fulfilling work. Adam would never feel the pressure of too many deadlines. His laptop would never go on the fritz. Neither had he any reason to fear an industrial accident. And then Adam and Eve had each other. This was a love relationship that would stagger us in its glory, that would blow us away in its intensity, that would in turn calm us in its beauty. And all of the above did not amount to a hill of beans compared to the real blessing. All of the above are but shadows of a far greater glory, icing on a far richer cake. The glory of the garden was this: they walked with God. What we lost was not just beholding, but entering into the very glory of God. That is to say, it would have been enough just to have been allowed the privilege of watching him walk by. That would have shrunk every other blessing down to size. But he did not merely walk by. He walked with. Adam and Eve drew near to him. To get just a glimpse of what this must have been like, recall to mind how C.S. Lewis portrayed the joyful Aslan playfully wrestling with the Pevensey children. This, not luscious fruit and tropical breezes, is what we lost. This loss, in turn, is what we are seeking so desperately to forget. We are haunted by Eden, which may help us to understand the peculiar way in which our modern culture practices its folly. We're told by Paul in Romans 1 that all men know that God exists, but we suppress that knowledge in unrighteousness. Supposing ourselves to be wise, we become fools and exchange the glory of the Creator for mere creatures. Our idolatry isn't merely embracing the wrong religion. It is rejecting what we know that we might bow down to what we have made. In Paul's day, it seemed that on every street corner there was a temple to this goddess and a statue to that god. Modern Americans are different. Or are we? We do not self-consciously bow down to gods of our own making. But if one were to step back enough to set aside the normalcy of our idolatry, we might find it in the strangest places. I suspect that archaeologists in future millennia, when they dig up our civilization, will suggest that we worshipped a nearly ubiquitous god named Starbucks. They would, of course, be missing the point. Starbucks is not our God, but a mere aid to our worship. We carry around cups of our drug of choice that will keep us awake and alert enough to attend to our gods, that we can distract our minds and our hearts with our smartphones, streaming services, our podcasts, our constant and perpetual influx of meaningless data. We're all aflutter, taking in media of one sort or another so that we will not hear the deafening echo of our emptiness, so that we won't feel the gnawing lack where once we walked with God. The strangest thing of all, however, is not the frantic forgetfulness of those yet on the outside. No, the truly strange thing is that Jesus has for us restored paradise. We walk with God, but will not listen because our earphones are piping in the latest new band. We will not see his glory because our eyes are captured by whatever's making the rounds today on YouTube. We will not even hold his palm, his scarred hand, because we're busy checking our retweets. That is, we who walk in paradise are too busy dancing with the devil to notice. The kingdom is here, and the kingdom is now. We need not, in one sense, seek it, for it has sought and found us. To seek what has already been found, we do not work harder. Instead, we stop. We listen. We see, we smell, we enter into the glory of his presence. Instead, we rejoice and give thanks that we are already seated with him in the heavenly places. There is no self-service up there. Be still and know that he is God. In that stillness you will hear first the heavenly choirs of angels as they cry out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." Then you will hear the Master's voice. Even now, even here on this side of the veil, you will hear him say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into your reward." And you will rejoice that he is that exceedingly great reward. He walks with you now in the cool of the evening, for lo, he is with us always.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.